In the heart of New York City, where life buzzed louder than the traffic honking below, two very different stories unfolded every day. One belonged to a man who had everything money could buy but still felt something missing deep inside him. The other was about a little girl who owned nothing except the tattered clothes on her back and a spirit that refused to break despite all odds. The man lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. His name wasn't important. What mattered was how he got there. He came from humble beginnings, growing up in a small town with barely enough food to eat or warm clothes to wear during winters. But over time, through sheer hard work and determination, he built himself an empire. Tech companies, luxury cars, expensive watches, he had it all. Yet, no matter how much success he achieved, there was always this nagging emptiness within him. It was like standing at the top of a mountain and realizing you're still alone on the flip side. Just blocks away from his shiny skyscraper apartment, another story played out quietly. This one involved a young girl whose age couldn't be more than 10. She didn't have parents anymore, or if she did, they were long gone, leaving her to fend for herself. Her days revolved around finding scraps of food people threw away and searching for safe places to sleep when night fell. Cardboard boxes became her shelter, and kindness from strangers kept her going. Despite everything, though, she carried a smile, a faint one, yes, but a smile nonetheless. Like a tiny flame refusing to go out even in the harshest storm. One cold December evening, their worlds collided outside a fancy restaurant called the Gilded Spoon. The millionaire had just finished a business dinner inside. He wore a tailored suit, polished shoes, and carried himself with confidence. As he stepped out into the chilly air, buttoning his coat against the frosty breeze, something caught his eye across the street. There, sitting on the curb under a flickering street lamp, was the little girl. She looked frail, almost fragile, bundled up in layers of mismatched sweaters too big for her frame. Her hair was messy, tangled, and unwashed. Yet her eyes held a glimmer of hope, hope not despair. That struck him immediately. Most people would glance at someone like her and walk past without giving it a second thought. But tonight something stopped him in his tracks. Instead of climbing into his waiting car, he crossed the road toward her. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if unsure whether approaching her was the right thing to do. When he finally stood beside her, he noticed the tin cup resting near her feet. It contained a few coins tossed carelessly by passers-by earlier that day. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, kneeling down so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice was gentle, not commanding or condescending. It surprised him how natural it felt to speak to her this way. The girl looked up hesitantly, meeting his gaze. For a moment, neither said anything. Then, after what seemed like forever, she nodded slightly. "I'm fine," she replied in a voice barely above a whisper. Her words carried a weight far heavier than any child should carry. But then, gathering courage, she added, "Mr. Can I eat with you?" Her question hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. It wasn't just about sharing a meal, it was about belonging, about being seen and acknowledged. Here was a child so hungry not just for food but for connection, that she dared to ask a complete stranger to sit with him and share his table. For a brief second, the man froze. Memories flooded back uninvited, memories of his own childhood, of nights spent staring at empty plates while others enjoyed full meals, of feeling invisible, insignificant, of longing for someone, anyone, to notice him. Those feelings had been buried deep beneath years of achievement and wealth, but now they resurfaced with startling clarity. He blinked, shaking off the past, and extended his hand toward her. "Of course," he said, his tone firm yet kind. "Let's go." And just like that, an unlikely bond began to form, one that would change both their lives forever. The man and the little girl walked side by side toward the entrance of the Gilded Spoon. The restaurant was one of those places where people dressed in their finest clothes, sipped expensive wine, and spoke in hushed tones about deals and dreams. Outside, golden light spilled onto the sidewalk, reflecting off sleek cars parked nearby. To the girl, it felt like stepping into a world she had only seen from afar through glass windows or glossy magazine covers. As they approached the door, the doorman hesitated. His polished uniform and stern expression seemed out of place next to the scruffy child clutching the man's hand. For a moment, the doorman looked unsure whether to let her in, but then the man gave him a firm nod, his eyes saying everything that needed to be said. "She's with me." Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, the kind of warmth that came not just from heaters, but from soft lighting, plush chairs, and the hum of polite conversation. The contrast between this world and the cold streets outside couldn't have been starker. The girl tightened her grip on the man's hand as they made their way to a table near the corner. Her wide eyes took in every detail, the sparkling chandeliers hanging above, the shiny silverware neatly arranged on pristine white tablecloths, and the waiters moving gracefully between tables. "Are you hungry?" the man asked once they were seated. His voice was calm, almost casual, as if bringing a homeless child to such a fancy place was something he did every day. The girl nodded quickly, her cheeks flushing red. She didn't want to seem too eager, but how could she hide it? This was the first time in months, maybe even years, that anyone had cared enough to ask her what she wanted to eat. "What would you like?" he continued, gesturing toward the menu. "You can choose anything." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the leather-bound menu. It felt heavy in her hands, its pages filled with words she barely understood. Foie gras, escargot, coco. None of these meant anything to her. So instead she pointed at pictures of soups and sandwiches, things that looked familiar, safe. "I'll have soup," she said softly, glancing up at him. "And bread, and maybe chicken." He smiled, signaling a waiter over. "Bring her whatever she wants," he instructed. "And make sure there's plenty of dessert, too." While they waited for the food, the man leaned back in his chair and studied her face. There was dirt smudged across her cheeks, and her hair was tangled, but none of that mattered. What caught his attention was the way her eyes lit up when she talked about tiny moments of kindness she'd experienced on the streets, a lady who shared her sandwich, a shopkeeper who let her sit inside during rainstorms, a stranger who gave her a blanket on a freezing night. Each story was told with gratitude, as if these small acts had saved her life. "You're very brave," he said after a while. "Most kids your age wouldn't survive out there the way you have." She shrugged, looking down at her lap. "I don't think I'm brave," she admitted. "I'm just trying to stay alive." Her honesty struck him hard. He remembered nights when he was younger, lying awake wondering if tomorrow would bring food or disappointment. Back then, survival wasn't bravery, it was necessity. And here was this little girl, living proof that resilience wasn't about being fearless. It was about keeping going, no matter what. When the food arrived, her eyes widened in disbelief. A steaming bowl of creamy soup sat in front of her, along with slices of freshly baked bread still warm from the oven. Roasted chicken glistened. Under a drizzle of herbs and mashed potatoes formed a fluffy mountain beside it. Dessert, a slice of chocolate cake topped with whipped cream, completed the feast. For a moment she didn't move. She just stared at the plate, tears welling up in her eyes. The man noticed and reached across the table to gently pat her hand. "It's okay," he assured her. She picked up her spoon carefully, almost reverently, and took her first bite of soup. The flavors exploded in her mouth, rich, comforting, unlike anything she'd tasted before. Tears spilled down her cheeks now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of joy, of finally feeling full after so many empty days. "Thank you," she whispered between bites. "Nobody's ever done this for me before?" Her words lingered in the air, simple yet profound. They reminded him of why he'd stopped to help her in the first place. It wasn't pity, it was empathy. Seeing himself in her, remembering the boy he used to be, had stirred something deep within him. Tonight wasn't just about feeding her body. It was about feeding her soul. Other diners began to notice them. Some glanced curiously, whispering behind raised hands. Others watched silently, moved by the sight of a wealthy man sharing a meal with a child who clearly belonged to a different world. One woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, while a businessman at the bar muttered something about humanity being dead, and then corrected himself when he saw the scene unfold before him. Eventually, the girl pushed her plate aside, unable to eat another bite. She looked directly at the man, her expression serious despite her young age. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Her question caught him off guard, but he answered honestly. "Because everyone deserves to feel valued," he said. "Especially someone as strong as you." The next morning, the story of the man and the girl began to spread like wildfire. Someone in the restaurant had snapped a photo of them, just a quick click on their phone, and posted it online with the caption, "A millionaire shares his table with a homeless child. Humanity isn't dead after all." Within hours, the image went viral. Social media platforms lit up with reactions. Some people praised the act of kindness, calling it a reminder of what truly mattered in life. Others criticized it, saying it was staged or just another rich person trying to look good for attention. But neither the man nor the girl knew about any of this yet. For them, the world still felt small and personal, confined to the warmth of that restaurant and the bond they had formed over a shared meal. After finishing dessert, a slice of chocolate cake with gooey frosting, the girl leaned back in her chair, her belly full for the first time in months. She looked at him with curious eyes. "What happens now?" she asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. He tilted his head slightly, thinking carefully before responding. "That's up to you," he said. "That I can promise you one thing: you won't have to go back to living on the streets tonight." Her jaw dropped. "Really?" "Really," he confirmed with a nod. "We'll figure something out together." They left the restaurant shortly afterward. The cold air hit them as soon as they stepped outside, but it didn't feel as biting anymore, not after the warmth they'd shared inside. He led her to his car, opening the door for her like she was royalty. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she should get in. Cars like this were things she usually saw from afar, not places she belonged. "It's okay," he reassured her. "You're safe with me." She climbed in, clutching the seatbelt tightly as if afraid it might disappear. As they drove through the city streets, she pressed her face against the window, marveling at the lights and buildings passing by. Everything seemed brighter somehow, more alive than she remembered. When they arrived at a cozy hotel downtown, he checked them into a room. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, just clean and comfortable, with soft beds and warm blankets. For the first time in ages, she fell asleep without worrying about the cold or danger lurking in the shadows. And for the first time in years, the man slept peacefully too, knowing he had done something meaningful. The following days turned into weeks, and their lives became intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted. The man rented a small apartment for her, close enough to his own place so he could check on her regularly. He enrolled her in school, making sure she had everything she needed: new clothes, books, even a backpack filled with supplies. At first, she struggled to adjust. School felt foreign, overwhelming. Other kids whispered behind her back, pointing at her mismatched socks or the lunchbox she carried. But slowly she began to find her footing, thanks to teachers who believed in her, and classmates who eventually warmed up to her. Meanwhile, the man found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. Helping her reignited a part of him that had been buried under years of chasing success. He started volunteering at shelters, spending weekends serving meals and listening to stories from others who had fallen through society's cracks. Each interaction reminded him of his own past, of nights spent wondering where his next meal would come from. And each story fueled his determination to do more. One evening, as they sat together in her new apartment eating pizza straight from the box, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think other people will help kids like me if they hear our story?" she asked. He paused, considering her question. "I don't know," he admitted. "But maybe we can try to make it happen." Inspired by her words, he decided to take action. Using his resources and influence, he launched a foundation aimed at helping homeless children and families. The project started small: a refurbished building near Central Park, transformed into a community center offering free meals, showers, and counseling services. But it quickly grew, attracting donations and volunteers eager to contribute. At the grand opening of the center, she stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but she didn't shy away. Instead, she stepped forward, speaking directly to the crowd gathered there. "I used to sleep in boxes and eat scraps off the ground," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But then someone showed me that I mattered, that I deserved better. Now I want to help others feel that way too." Her speech brought tears to many eyes, including his. Watching her stand tall, confident, and unafraid, he realized she had taught him far more than he had taught her. She had shown him the power of hope, resilience, and human connection. As months passed, the foundation expanded its reach, opening centers in cities across the country. More and more people joined the cause, inspired by the unlikely friendship that had sparked it all. Yet, despite the growing success, the man never forgot why he started. Every time he visited one of the centers, he made it a point to sit down with the children, sharing meals and listening to their stories. To him, these moments weren't charity, they were reminders of his own humanity. For the girl, life took on a rhythm she had never known before. She attended school diligently, excelling in subjects she once thought impossible to understand. Her teachers praised her curiosity and determination, while her peers admired her courage. Though scars from her past remained, she learned to carry them lightly, using them as fuel to push forward rather than weights holding her down. And through it all, the bond between her and the man only grew stronger. They weren't just benefactor and beneficiary, they were family. Two souls brought together by chance, united by compassion, and forever changed by the simple act of sharing a meal. As the months turned into years, the foundation grew bigger than anyone could have imagined. What started as a small community center near Central Park became a nationwide movement. People from all walks of life, teachers, doctors, business owners, even former homeless individuals who had been helped by the program joined forces to support the cause. The man's vision was no longer just his own. It belonged to everyone who believed in giving others a second chance. For the girl, life transformed in ways she never thought possible. She went from sleeping on cardboard boxes under flickering streetlights to waking up in a warm bed with sunlight streaming through her window. But more importantly, she found stability, a sense of belonging that had eluded her for so long. School became her sanctuary. At first, sitting in a classroom felt strange, almost intimidating. The other kids whispered about her worn-out shoes and hand-me-down clothes, but she didn't let their words break her spirit. Instead, she poured herself into her studies, determined to prove that she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. Her teachers noticed her hard work and encouraged her every step of the way. They saw potential in her, a spark that refused to dim despite everything she'd been through. By the time she reached high school, she was at the top of her class, earning awards and scholarships that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. Yet, no matter how much success she achieved academically, she never forgot where she came from. Every Friday evening, without fail, she visited one of the foundation's centers to volunteer. Whether it was serving meals, tutoring younger kids, or simply sitting and listening to someone's story, she made sure to give back as much as she had received. The man watched her grow with pride swelling in his chest. He often joked that she was the real driving force behind the foundation, not him. And in many ways he was right. Her courage and determination inspired countless others to join the cause. When news outlets covered the foundation's work, they always featured her alongside him. To the public, she wasn't just a beneficiary of kindness, she was proof that change was possible, that no matter how tough life got, there was always hope for a better tomorrow. One day, during an interview on a popular morning show, the host asked her a question that stopped her in her tracks. "What's the most important lesson you've learned over the past few years?" She thought for a moment before answering. "That we're all connected," she said finally, her voice steady despite the cameras pointed at her. "When I was living on the streets, I felt invisible, like nobody cared whether I lived or died. But then this man," she gestured toward him sitting beside her, "he showed me that I mattered. And now, because of him, I know I can make others feel the same way." Her words struck a chord with viewers across the country. Thousands of messages poured in, thanking her for reminding people of the importance of empathy and compassion. Schools, began incorporating her story into their curriculums, teaching students about resilience and the power of helping those in need. Even politicians cited the foundation's work as an example of what could be achieved when communities came together. But behind the scenes, life wasn't always smooth sailing. Running such a large organization came with its own set of challenges. There were days when funding ran low, forcing difficult decisions about which programs to prioritize. Other times, critics accused the foundation of being too idealistic, claiming it couldn't sustain itself in the long run. Through it all, the man relied on the girl's unwavering optimism to keep pushing forward. "You've already done so much," she told him one evening after a particularly exhausting day. They were sitting in his living room surrounded by papers and blueprints for new projects. "Don't give up now." He smiled faintly, leaning back in his chair. "It's not about giving up," he replied. "It's about figuring out how to do more. Sometimes it feels like we're barely scratching the surface." "Well, maybe that's okay," she said thoughtfully. "Even if we only help one person at a time, isn't that still worth it?" Her perspective shifted something inside him. He realized that while the scale of their impact mattered, the heart of their mission was rooted in individual stories. Each child who found shelter, each family reunited, each meal served, it all added up to something greater than numbers could measure. Over time, the foundation expanded beyond national borders, reaching countries where poverty and homelessness were rampant. The man traveled frequently, meeting with local leaders and activists to learn how best to adapt their model to different cultures and environments. Wherever he went, the girl accompanied him whenever possible. Together, they visited makeshift shelters, listened to heartbreaking stories, and witnessed both despair and hope in equal measure. During one trip to a rural village overseas, they met a boy around her age who reminded her of herself. His clothes were patched together, his feet bare, but his eyes shone with the same quiet strength she once carried. After spending hours talking with him and his family, she turned to the man with tears in her eyes. "We have to help them," she said firmly. "They deserve a chance too," and so they did. With each new project, the foundation continued to grow, touching lives in ways they hadn't anticipated. Yet, no matter how far they traveled or how many people they helped, the bond between the man and the girl remained unshakable. They were partners in every sense of the word, two souls bound by shared experiences and a common purpose. Years later, when the man decided to step back from his role as the face of the foundation, it was the girl who took the reins. She had graduated college with honors, earning a degree in social work, and was ready to lead the organization into its next chapter. Standing beside her at the announcement ceremony, he felt a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and maybe even a hint of sadness, knowing his active involvement was coming to an end. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he told her afterward, pulling her into a tight hug. "You've taught me more than I ever taught you." She laughed, softly hugging him back. "Maybe we taught each other." Years passed, and the foundation became a beacon of hope for countless people around the world. The girl who once slept on cold streets was now leading an organization that had touched millions of lives. She wasn't just a symbol of resilience anymore. She was a leader, a changemaker, someone others looked up to. Yet despite all her achievements, she never lost sight of where she came from or the man who had changed everything for her. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, she stood at a podium during the grand opening of yet another center, this one dedicated to providing education and job training for homeless teens. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and crowds cheered as she delivered her speech. Her voice was steady, confident, but there was a softness to it too, a reminder of the little girl who had once dared to ask if she could eat with a stranger. "I didn't always believe I mattered," she began, pausing to look out at the sea of faces before her. "There were nights when I wondered if anyone would notice if I disappeared, but then someone did notice. Someone saw me not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worth helping." Her eyes found the man standing near the back of the crowd. He was older now, his hair streaked with gray, but his presence still commanded respect. Their gazes locked briefly, and he gave her a small nod. A silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come together. That person taught me something important, she continued. He showed me that kindness isn't about money or fame, it's about seeing someone else's humanity and choosing to act. Because of him, I learned that even the smallest acts of compassion can create ripples we may never see ourselves. The audience erupted into applause, but she quickly raised a hand to quiet them. This foundation isn't mine, she said firmly. It belongs to everyone who has ever believed in second chances, to every volunteer who has given their time, to every donor who has contributed what they could. Most importantly, it belongs to the people it serves, the ones who remind us daily that hope is alive and well, no matter how dark things may seem. When the ceremony ended, she stepped off the stage and made her way through the crowd toward the man. People stopped her along the way, shaking her hand, thanking her, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. She listened patiently, offering words of encouragement whenever she could. By the time she reached him, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the park where the event had taken place. You were amazing up there, he said with a proud smile as they walked side by side toward a nearby bench. Thanks, she replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But you know none of this would have happened without you. He chuckled softly, waving a dismissive hand. Don't give me too much credit. You're the one carrying the torch now. They sat down on the bench, watching children play tag. Under the fading light, for a while neither spoke. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with years of shared memories and unspoken gratitude. Finally, she broke the quiet. Do you remember that night? At the restaurant? He nodded, a distant look in his eyes. How could I forget? That was the night my life changed forever, she smiled faintly. Mine too. I didn't just ask you if I could eat with you. I asked you if I mattered, and you showed me that I did. Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. They reminded him of why he had stopped to help her in the first place, not out of pity, but because he saw himself in her. Both of them had known hunger not just for food, but for connection, for belonging. In that moment, they had saved each other in ways neither fully understood until much later. As twilight settled over the city, she leaned her head against his shoulder. I hope we've done enough, she murmured. We've done more than enough, he assured her. And the best part is, it's not over yet. This foundation, it'll keep going long after we're gone. She nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The weight of responsibility no longer felt crushing. Instead, it felt like a privilege. Together, they had built something bigger than themselves, something that would continue to grow and evolve with each passing year. Months later, the man decided it was time to step away completely. Though he remained involved in an advisory role, he wanted to spend his remaining years enjoying the simpler things in life, reading books, taking walks in the park, and occasionally visiting the centers to reconnect with the people whose lives he had touched. One crisp winter morning, he sat alone on a bench overlooking Central Park, sipping coffee from a paper cup. The air smelled of snow, and the trees stood bare against the pale blue sky. As he watched children laugh and chase each other, he felt a deep sense of contentment. His journey from a struggling boy in a small town to a wealthy entrepreneur, to a man humbled by the kindness of a child, had come full circle. A familiar figure approached, holding 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. It was her, bundled up in a thick coat, her cheeks rosy from the cold. She handed him one of the cups and sat down beside him. I thought you might need this, she said with a grin. It's freezing out here. He accepted the drink gratefully, wrapping his hands around its warmth. You didn't have to do that. I know, she replied, but I wanted to. They sat together in companionable silence, savoring the moment. After a while, she turned to him with a mischievous glint in her eye. Remember that question I asked you that night? He raised an eyebrow, pretending to think hard. Which one? The big one, she teased. Can I eat with you? He laughed, the sound rich and hearty. And look where that question got us. She joined in his laughter, her breath forming tiny clouds in the frosty air. Yeah. Pretty far, huh? Pretty far, he agreed, his tone turning serious. But I'm glad it did. You saved me as much as I saved you, you know? Her smile softened and she rested her head on his shoulder again. We saved each other. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the promise of new beginnings, they both knew the truth. Their bond was unbreakable, not because of wealth or power, but because of the simple act of saying yes to a meal, to a friendship, to a chance at a better life. And so, as the world moved forward, their story lived on, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, resilience, and love.